My name is Emma Carter, and I will never forget the morning my sister called to tell me our father had died. The only problem was that he was sitting 3 feet away from me, stealing bacon off my breakfast plate while sipping his coffee. I quietly put the call on speaker. Rachel did not cry. She simply said Dad had passed away during the night, that everything he owned now belonged to her and her husband Kyle, and that I would receive absolutely nothing. Kyle laughed in the background and said I was finally out of the family. My father calmly set down his coffee, smiled and listened. They had no idea the man they believed was dead was hearing every word. What happened over the next 2 days ended in a funeral that our entire town still talks about. 9 months earlier, Dad had fallen off a ladder while cleaning his gutters and broken his wrist. I was working as a travel nurse several states away, so Rachel insisted she and Kyle would care for him until he recovered. They convinced him to sign a limited power of attorney so Kyle could pay his bills while his hand healed. It sounded completely normal, and I trusted them. Slowly, though, things changed. Every time I called, Rachel answered instead of Dad. She claimed he was sleeping, resting, or too tired to talk. I mailed him a new phone after she said his old one had broken, but somehow it disappeared. Then another phone vanished too. Every attempt to reach him ended with another excuse. When I came home for Christmas, Dad looked different. He had lost weight, barely spoke, and admitted he had not seen his own bank statements in months, because Kyle handled everything now. The moment I suggested reviewing his finances together, Kyle became defensive, accusing me of causing unnecessary family drama. Dad asked me not to ruin Christmas, so I reluctantly returned to work. A few months later, an old nurse friend called with shocking news. She worked at a nursing home where an elderly resident kept asking every nurse if they knew his daughter. Emma, that resident was my father. Nobody had ever told me he had been placed there. Drove straight to the facility. Dad looked thinner, but he was mentally sharp. He believed I had abandoned him because Rachel and Kyle had convinced him. I knew about the nursing home and approved it. They had taken away his phone, intercepted my letters, and spent months convincing each of us that the other no longer cared. The nursing home admitted there was no diagnosis of dementia or mental incapacity. Dad was legally competent the entire time. Within an hour, he signed his own discharge papers and walked out beside me. The next day, we visited his bank, and the truth was worse than I imagined. Nearly $187,000 had disappeared from his accounts. Large transfers had gone into Kyle's company, while other payments covered Rachel and Kyle's Florida condo. We also found paperwork for a huge loan against Dad's fully paid-off house. An elder law attorney immediately froze the loan, revoked every power of attorney, and uncovered something even worse. Someone had forged a second power of attorney, giving Kyle complete financial control. Medical records proved Dad had been under sedation at a doctor's appointment when that document claimed he was signing it before a notary. Our attorney explained that criminal charges would be much stronger if Rachel and Kyle publicly relied on those forged documents. That was when Dad came up with an unbelievable idea. His lifelong friend Earl, a retired funeral director, called Rachel and simply told her Dad had collapsed and passed away. No fake death certificate, no official report, just believable news from someone everyone trusted. Rachel never asked how he died or whether she could see him. Her first concern was his paperwork. Within hours, she and Kyle were changing the locks on his house and preparing to claim everything. 2 days later, the town gathered for Dad's memorial service. Veterans, neighbors, church friends, and lifelong family friends filled the hall. Kyle confidently walked to the podium and announced that Dad had left his house. Money, truck, and everything else to Rachel and him. Then, he proudly read the line saying I had been intentionally left with nothing. The room grew quiet, because everyone knew how close Dad and I had always been. Just as Kyle finished reading, the side door slowly opened. My father calmly walked into his own memorial service wearing his best suit. The entire room froze. Rachel looked like she had seen a ghost, and Kyle stood motionless with the forged will still raised in his hand. Dad walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, looked at the closed casket, smiled, and quietly said, "Dead men do not sign papers." Our attorney immediately stepped forward and laid out the evidence. Medical records proved Dad could not have signed the forged documents. Bank statements traced every stolen dollar. The fake power of attorney, the fraudulent loan application, and the forged will all pointed to the same people. Even one of Kyle's own co-workers admitted he had unknowingly witnessed paperwork he believed was routine. Within minutes, sheriff's deputies entered the hall. Kyle was escorted away for questioning as his entire story collapsed in front of everyone. He had spent years impressing. Rachel finally admitted they had been drowning in debt and believed they could replace the money before anyone noticed. But then she turned to blame me for exposing them. That was the moment I realized she was not sorry for what she had done. She was only sorry she had been caught outside. Before the deputies drove away, Dad looked at Rachel with complete calm and finally spoke the words he had saved since that phone call 2 days earlier. "You buried the wrong man, sweetheart." Most of Dad's money was eventually recovered. The loan against his house was cancelled. Kyle lost his mortgage license and faced fraud charges, while Rachel accepted probation, restitution, and community service. Dad moved back into his own home. The very first thing he did was wind my late mother's old brass clock. The moment it started ticking again, the house finally felt alive. Today, every Sunday I drive over for breakfast, and Dad still steals bacon from my plate just to make me laugh. We recovered most of the money, but that was never the greatest victory. The real victory was that he got his voice back before it was too late. Because money can be stolen, property can be taken, but as long as you still have your voice, nobody gets to write the ending of your story for you.